It's called salt. Yep.
So. Everybody is kind of this. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Is this being recorded? Yes.
Good to know.
I think you can send out something. Yes.
Yeah, I may need to work a little bit tomorrow.
just, and it really does. Every school.
Perfect. All right, nope. Let's go.
Hello? There we go. So it's 5 o'clock. We'll want to get going. Hello to those of you on here virtually. Thank you for being here for the community meeting this evening. I'm Brian Cochran, the principal of Denver School of the Arts. You're also going to hear from a couple district representatives, and I will make sure they get a chance to introduce themselves, and the clicker's not working. Tested all of this. There we go. So kind of a purpose and overview of this evening. We want everyone to kind of hear my vision for DSA that we've discussed with CSC, how DSA is going to move forward, also acknowledging where we've been. We'll talk through some quick norms for the evening. Then you're going to hear from Andrew Huber, the Executive Director of Enrollment and Campus Planning. You'll also hear from Mary Beth Lawson from our DPS Foundation. And then we're going to open it up to some questions and answers from the audience. And we'll wrap with some closing, some takeaways, and get some feedback from you all. So, most importantly for me, sorry, I feel weird being on camera, and I step off a little bit here because we're going to look at everybody. Most important for me is I want DSA to be a place that is safe and welcoming for everybody. Safe and welcoming for everybody. I want every student, I want every staff member, I want every family member to feel welcome coming into DSA, asking questions, sharing feedback, offering ideas, and just being them, their whole selves, being their authentic selves. And that's especially important for our students. In my 24 weeks here at DSA since August, I've really gained an appreciation for DSA as a place where our students can find their people and can be who they are. They can bring their whole selves and they can make mistakes and they're not ostracized. They're not separated out into cliques. They find their friends, they find their people, and our staff are very accepting and welcoming also. And so I want to continue to build that and make sure that's an opportunity that's available to even more students. And along with that is making sure every student is seen and known. They're more than their major. They have varied interests, they have multiple talents. They are more than a dancer. They are more than an artist. They are more than a test score. And a challenge to our staff that I've put out is to make sure we know our students on a human level. We know about them as whole people, again, so they feel safe and they feel welcome here. And to continue to build on what DSA has done so well for so long, and that's nurturing that artistic passion and developing it and refining it so that whatever pathway our students choose when they leave here, they feel prepared and they feel ready. We have intense majors here. We ask a lot of our students when it comes to their major. They're in there for an hour and a half every day during the school day and countless hours outside of the school day to develop and pursue that artistic passion. And that's a good thing. I view that as a feature, not a bug of DSA. That is what we want to build on. And we also want to increase diversity and enrollment. We want to make sure DSA is a place that is, again, welcome to all and available to all. We want to see our enrollment, our staff represent the city we're in. We are making progress there, which we'll talk about later, but we're not where we want to be. And my vision for DSA is to increase that diversity and enrollment, and not just racially, but socioeconomically. We want to see our numbers of free and reduced lunch enrollment go up. We want to see our percentage of minority students go up. We want to see our percentage of MLE students go up. In addition to our very strong artistic program, we have a very strong academic program. Most recently, top 6 in the state, #1 in DPS when it comes to high schools. We want more students to have access to that. And what we're doing with this building you're sitting in, this campus you're on, is part of increasing that access and increasing that diversity. Our partnerships with Iovine and Young that you're going to hear about, our staffing model, what we're doing in terms of looking forward is really centered around this vision. A place that is more diverse, that is larger, and that is safe and welcoming for everybody. So that transitions to Andrew Hubert to really kind of talk about DSA enrollment and some historical, but also looking forward.
Is this guy working now?
Yep.
All right. Thank you for having me here this evening. My voice is a little bit in and out right now. So I start coughing. Promise I'm not getting you sick. It's just the nature of the time of year. So my name is Andrew. I'm DPS's Executive Director for Enrollment and Campus Planning. So the department that I manage for the district is responsible for our choice processes, for our long-range planning around kind of what our school configuration and portfolio looks like. Oh, well, I got this. Do you want me to use it? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
You're online.
Folks online hear us? Why not? Yes, great. Okay, thank you. And I manage our district real estate. So I think of the areas that are within my area of ownership. Obviously, two of those are of paramount importance to the DSA community around kind of the campus that we're on right now, for which I can speak about kind of DPS's long range plans and enrollment dynamics at the district level and at the school level, which have had the pleasure of collaborating with Brian and your CSC on over the course of recent months. So I do want to spend a quick moment on, and I know this is going to be really hard to see. So I'm going to tell you what's on here on kind of DPS enrollment trends, because I think it does frame what's going on in the context of DSA and why I think a renewed and dedicated focus around enrollment at the school becomes so important in the time that we're living in right now. So I think as a result of a variety of factors, most notably kind of birth rate trends and migration patterns around residential development and affordability in the city and county of Denver, DPS is known for quite some time that enrollment would begin to decline as a district, as a system. So birth rates in Denver peaked in about 2002. And if you think about it, right, like first of all, kids can't attend school who were never born. And second of all, it takes a long time for those types of trends to make their way through our entire system. Where we have, a kid who's born in 2002, only in 2020 were they exiting kind of DPS schools, assuming that their families could afford to stay in the city and county of Denver. So when we talk about declining enrollment, we've known that that's coming as a system. And it's something that is directly kind of impacting the way that we're experiencing things here at DSA. For this year's enrollment in particular, saw an acute decline. So what you would see if you added all this up is that DPS saw about, this year we enrolled about 1,200 fewer students as a system in comparison to October count last year. We expected only 500. And that number more than doubled. And the unfortunate reality of that is that that's due to the kind of intensifying departure of new to country students from our system. I think those of us who are aware of what's happening in a national context, that probably won't be a surprise to you, but a trend that is making kind of an underlying demographic trend markedly worse. So something that we're wrestling with as a system, and when we're losing 1,200, 1,500 this upcoming year, up to 2,000 kids out of a system per year, that's multiple schools, multiple well-enrolled schools worth of kids who just aren't there. And we need to figure out how to navigate around that as a system. Yeah.
So I guess the question that I have is, does the drop in enrollment or the trend have anything to do with the fact that you have young people that have graduated and have chosen not to come back to Colorado?
I mean,
does it have any, does that relate to it at all?
I think that certainly probably plays a part in it, given the affordability context of the city. I think the migration, the primary age at which we're seeing folks move out of the city and county of Denver is right around the time that they have kids, which is unfortunate for us as a system. But so when we say we have between around 7,500 kids born in Denver per year, That doesn't mean that we're going to get 7,500 kids 5 years later,
Right.
because, you know, a lot of young families look around and they say, you know, what can I afford here? And what can I afford out the birch? Is the unfortunate reality. So I do think that kind of that's where we see the afford, and I think the affordability piece could certainly play a role in that too. I think Denver is now unfortunately known as a place where it's hard to afford to live on a national level. We're expecting that to continue, and I think I'm sharing all of this because I want the broader context before we talk about kind of the individual DSA context. But we run a report called Strategic Regional Analysis every year, where we look at those birth rate trends. We look at every planned development that's permitted in the city and county of Denver, and we say what is kind of past behavior and kind of enrollment yields from residential development and from those birth rates mean for the future. And what we're experiencing now is kind of a continually declining birth rate context. And one where we are just at the beginning of what we expect to be dealing with for probably 18 to 20 years, even if birth rates were to stabilize in the next year or two, which is something that is my department's job as in the context of the district to figure out how to deal with that. Fortunately, some of the more painful strategies that we need to explore are not something that we need to have that conversation about here, but it does frame the context of as we're looking towards growth in the DSA, kind of in the DSA community. That as we're looking to grow, that also means that we're looking for an even bigger piece of the pie in terms of the number of kids who are looking to enroll relative to the district at large. But expect this number. So we only forecast out 5 years, but like I said, takes 18 years for a kid to get through our system, and we hit a new low in birth rates in Denver this year. Or last year is the unfortunate reality. What does that look like on a regional level? Not great. Is the short answer. And I think there's been there's good news here for DSA. I promise I'm getting to the good news part of this, because I know this is super depressing. What every part of Denver, with the exception of far northeast, so this being the kind of Tower Gateway area, both sides of Pena Boulevard when you're going to the airport. I think we've all seen, if you've been in Denver for any period of time, how much residential development is still happening there. I've been a part of the kind of DPS ecosystem for over 15 years now, in one form or another. And I remember a time when this was prairie dogs up here, and now there's development as far as the eye can see. And we're building schools, whereas in the rest of the city, we're having the opposite conversation. So as we're talking about losing hundreds of kids per year, Southwest Denver by itself last year lost 600 kids. We're having the opposite conversation where we're exploring what's the right number of schools for the system that we're trying to run. So this is this is the backdrop of what's of kind of the environment that we're all working within. So what does that look like at DSA? DSA, and I'm not suggesting that there's necessarily kind of a direct correlation or for the causal relationship between this and this. And the reality is that at the same time as DPS enrollment has been declining, DSA enrollment has declined as well. And I know that there, at various times over the course of years, there's may have been even a deliberate effort to restrict the number of students who were here because of concerns around class size and crowding. Particularly when we were, when DSA was exclusively operating out of the North Campus. I would say that out of the North Campus, at one point, the school was operating with around 1,200 kids, which is hard to conceive of now that we have all this space down here. I can only imagine kind of the experience of what how full the school felt at that time. But over the course of the last 5 years, have seen a notable decline. And I think my concern when I look at this is, and I understand, right? Like DSA has a demand, and we're going to get to that in a second, that stretches far and wide across the Denver metro area, and in some sense has the ability to control its own enrollment because of this is a nationally recognized program that is and will continue to be for as long as DPS will exist, which is hopefully for for a very long time, kind of a cornerstone, a crown jewel of what the district is, of what the kind of fabric of the district looks like. What I see here is I mean, this, while this is deeply concerning for me at a systems level, this is a little bit sad for me at the level of with the how exceptional the programming is here and the life-changing impact. I mean, just having conversations with folks before this time, the life-changing impact that this program has on kids. We want more kids to have access to this programming, and we have the kind of the foundation that I believe we're working towards right now, with which to do that. And I'm actually okay to just take questions.
Whatever works for you.
Go ahead, and then.
So, I mean, you've touched on it, but it's curious to me because I don't know if DSA seems to be operating on a very different way than all of the other schools.
Mhm.
So all of the students who come to DSA have gone through the audition process, right?
Yep.
We know that many are not accepted. So I don't know, I guess, how can you reconcile for me, like the difference here in like declining enrollment versus like demand? Because it seems like the demand is existing and declining enrollment would be.
That's exactly what I'm saying,
Yeah.
actually, and I'm going to get there, and I promise we're going to get to the point where I make that point. And I do believe that, I mean it when I say I believe that DSA has the ability to control its own destiny with respect to enrollment, independent of these demographic trends. I think these demographic trends probably limit how high we think the ceiling is. Right? Can we get to the 2,000 kids? That number that I know was once bandied about. That in the context of a system where I expect us to be 10, 15,000 kids down over the course of the next 10 to 15 years does not feel realistic to me, if I'm being totally honest. I think there's a lower ceiling than that, where I do believe that because of that audition process, because of the fact that there's kind of sustained, robust demand for the school, which we have. I mean, and I think it's important to note, we have looked at audition data, and auditions have steadily, the number of auditions has steadily declined over time, and precipitously declined over time. If you look at kind of on an extended back, and I think that speaks to what it means to operate successfully and what it means to grow, even in a school where you have that level of demand in a declining enrollment environment. You have to want it, and you have to go get it, if that makes sense.
One of the things that we talked about in CSC that I in the conversation is a potential factor affecting declining auditions and declining enrollment is my kid plays a wind instrument. But at the dates, a lot of schools, my kid from an award-winning elementary school that does an amazing band program. There were 2 years the band teacher didn't teach any wind instruments because of the pandemic. So you kind of severed the pipeline. So one of the things I want to enter in the conversation, you're looking at declining enrollment is like this is declining enrollment coming out of the pandemic in which very few elementary schools have arts programs, and the ones that didn't teach wind instruments for 2 years. So mask up.
Yep.
So you can't have kids showing up to audition if there's no elementary school band class. Also, I think that can have a ripple effect across many of the performing arts. If your only way to a theater show is on Zoom, like why bother go play a sport if you create a writing? So I think that's a really important factor when we're looking at numbers is kids can't audition if they didn't learn. So many kids quit. I can tell you how hard it was for my 11-year-old to persevere and play virtual flute for a year and a half. Most kids quit because it was too hard. Professional musicians stopped playing. So just, there's the enrollment, there's other factors, but
I think
audition kids who aren't learning, don't learning them.
And look, my daughter, my 10-year-old daughter is learning to play the violin at her school, but that's a substantial investment that we need to make in that. And fortunately, kind of post-pandemic world, she's only in 4th grade, so that's when they only start that in 3rd grade. So we've had that, and that's not a wind instrument. I'm acutely aware of that. The other thing that I would say about that is that there is a connection between this and what you're talking about, and that's that if we're talking about what it looks like for elementary schools to be able to sustain robust arts programming, if we have the same number of, last year we closed 7 elementary schools, right? Like, and I expect that to be the beginning of a process that we need to come back to iteratively over time. But when you're talking about spreading resources thinner and thinner, Colorado is funded per pupil, so dollars follow kids in this state. And if a school that once had 300 kids now has 150 kids, the first things to go are electives and the arts. I'm telling you that right now as somebody who sits in a lot of school budget conversations and has those experiences. And if we don't do a good enough job keeping up with the rate of decline that we're seeing as a system, we're going to see more and more elementary schools have to cut that kind of programming even in the future. So I see that as a systems level responsibility that I regret to say that is mine for what the right number of schools is to be operating with, to be able to provide the robust experience with access to the pursuit of passions that we should care as so much about as a district, and I think that is directly connected to this trend is what I would say. Yeah, did you have a?
I think going along with that, and the fact that elementary schools are cutting certain programs and other programs that aren't even offered, then it becomes our responsibility financially to feed the passions in these kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that isn't always available to everybody. I mean, we're very lucky that we can afford to. Like, we have a theater kid. She's been doing this since she was 4. It's a lot of money.
I know.
All these plays and to have her, take voice lessons and dance lessons and all this. Not everybody can afford that. So where is the pipeline going to come if you're not getting people of a certain socioeconomic group that can afford that?
Listen, I don't know how far you want me to go in this conversation right now, but I have some very acute thoughts around. I do think that as it creates a real income barrier when schools are not able to provide that kind of programming, because that's the only place in our society. Schools are the only place in our society where I think that kind of programming can be provided at minimum cost to families. So I could not possibly agree more. We're gonna go here and then.
So mine is kind of piggybacked on hers, but I'm thinking about, we're talking about, having lesser and lesser students, but I'm thinking about it from an equity lens. What about the schools where they don't have those programs in place in the first place? I mean, how do we begin to or continue to try and make connections with those students? Because, some students are fortunate enough to go to a school where the families and the kids that go there, their parents are more affluent.
Yep.
But like I said, in thinking about it from the space of an equity lens, what about those schools like, Smith, Howard, Stedman, some of those schools that don't have that conglomerate of parent participation or even the money for kids to just have instruments. How do we create that connection so we don't have numbers like this? Because there are ways that we can turn those numbers around.
Yep.
I can say as a parent that had 3 kids that graduated from DSA, we didn't have the money, but we made it work. And that's what
I'm saying is, it's like you want to diversify. How? Economically, you're not going to diversify, because if I can't afford all these lessons, my child's not going to get that. And then when the audition time comes, they're not going to have the proper preparation to be able to make it into the school, because the standards are high, which they should be.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's like this, it's a dichotomy that's really hard.
And that's why I would say, just a comment, with parents, we have a responsibility to work together to make those things happen from a space.
What I will say from the DSA lens, because Andrew's expertise is more than district lens, These are all absolutely valid observations, and as part of conversations that we're having. We don't have an answer right now,
Right.
but it's conversations we're engaging in, with CSC, with our staff, with our students, with our directors. What can we do to get into elementary schools that are lacking program? How can we bring some of our programming to them to build up interest, to build that pipeline? What can we do across borders in other cities that are maybe Denver families are moving to remote, moving to partner, and how can we get them back? Because we're going to see them out. We are pulling families from across the area. That's a unique thing that we have at DSA, where we have some opportunities maybe some other schools don't have. But those conversations are absolutely taking place, and they're part of what we want to address them.
So I wanted, if I could, to name two factors I haven't heard coming up beforehand, and then offer an idea or a solution. The first is, I think we just have to be honest and correct and name the reputational issues that DSA has developed in the time frame that we're talking about within the Denver. I'm very hopeful that we have new leadership. I've been delighted to see much more social media activity. But the reality is that DSA has a reputational problem, at least among parts of the Denver community, and that's just got to be addressed. A second is to name the possibility that and I know the CSC does pay quite a bit of attention to this, but that we may be losing kids within this time at DSA because of problems supporting certain classes of kids. There's been lots of discussion about diversity and equity. DSA is known within Denver parents as being a school that does not support kids who have 504 and IEPs. I've been sad to see that continue through some of this year. That's, we have a gajillion twice exceptional kids, and even if they're not twice exceptional, but exceptional in their own way, we need to be able to support that. I don't see how we grow with integrity without talking about that. With those two things said, I would love to see DSA students, and I think DSA students would love to be more involved in touching elementary schools throughout the district, especially within DPS. I'm going to go beyond that. Every single kid at DSA who's been here, for a semester and a half has something to offer to younger kids. We already have programs that do that. We have high school musicians who are mentoring middle school musicians. That's something everybody coming to DSA should know about. But I don't think kids need a massive amount to be inspired in their art if they know what the pathway looks like. So if you're a second grader and you've seen a dance performance and you know your school system has this arts program and you know that what that audition requires is for you to show your capacity to dance, not for you necessarily to have mastered tap or ballet or anything else, but just to be able to show that. We have so many ways within this city, from the libraries, we have so many people who make their reporting to show that you. If we combine being ultra transparent about what auditions require at DSA, with kids going out and saying, this is my story, how I got here. I think there's a huge, even in the context, it's not getting as much training. And I
agree completely, and I would say similarly, those are all similar conversations we're having. Like, what's feasible? How do we do that? How do we build that out? And transparently, I've had the permanent role for about 3 weeks, so we're in the early stages. But those are conversations we're absolutely engaged in.
But from a parent perspective, of a kid who's trying to handle one sport, sometimes two sports, plus practicing at a really high level. For her to do that, she needs not just the support of her major teacher, which is what she probably would have. She needs her academic teachers to be supportive. She needs the academic teachers to say, you need some time to do this. I can do that. I have enough power to allow you to turn this in on Tuesday rather than Wednesday. Or, hey, you're going to do outreach. I can incorporate that into something about your honors project. That's something we don't have at the moment, and I hope we'll see.
Can I say something to you as a parent that, my oldest child graduated in 2007. He went all the way through DSA. He started in 6th grade, finished in 12th grade. He went all the way through with an I. And it wasn't easy, none of it. But he wanted to be here. So what we tried to do is we tried to make a way to where he could stay. And he wouldn't let me finish. And also, there was a time with DSA when they had students on a regular basis that went out and did lessons at most all of them, not just the ones that they were familiar with or that they went to. And I think that's something that if we work with admin, we can institute. But at the same time, this is the thing. If a child auditions and they get into whatever program it is they're going to be in, they've signed up for the things that are going to occur, whether it be pressure academically and all of the things. They sign up for that. And so what has to happen, I would say, is sometimes you have to own those things.
I really appreciate this, Ronnie, and I am so glad that your child was able to stay. My child desperately wanted to be here, and the administration did not help us. And I've got a pile of debt and a kid who would love to still be at DSA, who has followed a well-trodden path from DSA to East, where there is much better support, and the teachers, the academic teachers, are empowered to support their kids. We have a long way to do that, to get back to that idea.
And I'm going to share some data that I think underscores the need for exactly what you're talking about. And that's around, I think, socioeconomic racial diversity in the context of the school. I know a lot of folks probably saw, Melanie's article this morning in Chalkbeat, so you understand some of the macro context here. But I think that there are pockets of progress and there are pockets of what I would classify as disappointing returns on our effort to both socioeconomically and racially grow the diversity of DSA. And I think it's really important for us to note that these are not, these are not the Venn diagram. These bubbles are separate, right? Like socioeconomic, racial diversity are two fundamentally different things. And I think that you see that given, I think, the way that I read this data is extremely modest progress and way off of the district in terms of at a macro level, in terms of the socioeconomic, and free or reduced, FRL means free or reduced lunch. So that's our kind of indicator for what socioeconomic diversity looks like in the context of a school. But when we're talking about racial diversity, I think that the returns there are modestly more positive, but still not acceptable in the context of the demographics of the district at large. And I think it's important for me to say that, and to say that I know that Brian is committed, and I do want him to share a little bit in a moment about kind of the year that we've had in recruitment and enrollment this year, both at a macro level and when we're talking about different demographic indicators. And what I see here is backwards progress at the middle school level, which I think is really interesting. And I see progress at the high school in a variety of different ways. And I think that's deeply nuanced. I think that this community is probably better equipped. I can tell you what I see in the data. I think this community is probably better equipped than I am to interpret it relative to the experience within the context of the school. But going backwards, so 2021 at these middle school grades, we were at 40, 30, 43. 35, and we've slid backwards to 34, 40, and 32. That's not acceptable. I think at the high school level, have seen companion growth, and I think that the kind of the diverging experience, where the middle school is becoming less diverse, the high school is becoming more diverse, is something that I don't have a good handle on, because I don't have enough kind of lived context in the context of the environment. But I think it's something that's really important for me to share.
Andrew,
Please.
we have a demographic question from online.
Yep.
And they are curious, what percentage of DSA students are from outside DPS? Has the district looked at expanded recruitment outside of the district and partnering with neighboring districts that do not have a performing arts pathway in high school and have a strong pool of students that are interested in a school like DSA? And for within DPS, what does recruitment look like to encourage students to audition?
Great question. Thoughtful. So I think on the, I will need to go back to my computer to pull the exact data. I will tell you that out of district enrollment is a substantial driver of enrollment at DSA in a way that it isn't universally across the board within DPS, within the DPS context. I think that's part of the reason why I have a lot of excitement and enthusiasm about what the future looks like here, because I believe this declining enrollment environment, but an environment where we are seeing more and more families utilize choice to kind of control their kids' educational outcomes. That I think both within the district and outside of the district, I'm going to show maps on this in just a second, I promise. That is one of the strengths of that's the core reason of optimism that I have. I think effective recruitment is very personal, and Brian and I have actually dialogued quite a bit about what effective recruitment practices look like over the course of the past few months. And in my mind, you have to go to where people are, right? Like you can't just count on the name bringing them here. And I think that looks like getting back into elementary schools and into those arts classrooms in elementary schools and in middle schools, where we're trying to enroll more 9th graders than we might have in 8th grade. So we're always going to have to bring more kids into the fold in 9th grade than we have enrolled in 8th grade. And I think that looks like going to those places and making your case. It looks like the lessons that you might be referring to. It looks like getting, Brian and other members of the school administration team with kids going into those environments and saying, we have a world-class program here at DSA. If you like what's going on in this arts classroom right now, you can make you have a life-changing, transformational experience at our school. Please come. And then I think it looks like, I think about enrollment, recruitment as a funnel, right? Like you want the top of the funnel to be as wide as possible to capture as many kids as you can coming into the process. And then it looks like interrogating the process at a really intentional level, looking at the audition process and who makes it through the audition process, who drops out during the process before they even get an answer, right? Like how many kids are waitlisted? What's the demographic of those kids who are being waitlisted? And I think it's going to that level of depth in the data. And I think it looks like, there are performing arts centers in all of those kind of out of district environments I'm talking about. There's one down in Parker that's been in the news recently. There's one up at Arvada, right? Like they're kind of all around the perimeter of the, not just within Denver, but around the perimeter of Denver. And I think it's about taking DSA's nationally nationally known world-class name and program, and making sure that the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in the Denver metro area who care about the arts know about what's happening here and the life-changing impact that it has on kids. Yes, we're going to go there because you had your hand up a couple times, and then.
Yeah, so we choosing cities without
Yep.
We've been trading in like.
So I didn't mean to be flippant about that.
Right. No, no. And validating. We've been tracing in that my son was a 6th grader. And I think thinking outside of the metro area is a fabulous idea. I'm sure this is already conversation, but transportation is a significant factor to those of class that Troy did, especially with SARC, for instance. It's a real challenge. So I think I should have a conversation about what was the fun, to recruit from outside and then like very close to being a 16-year-old boy who's going to get to drive very soon. It's been a long haul to be able to get.
I think transportation is a critical part of that conversation. And what I will say is that it's not a silver bullet in and of itself. You still need the kids to want to get on the bus. And I have seen a lot of schools run buses that are empty buses coming from places where they want kids to, because they're not doing the things that I was just talking about around getting the name out, right? Like it doesn't matter if the bus is pulling up on the corner near your street, if you've never heard of the school. That is just more background noise, right? Like, so what I will say is it's kind of a both and it's not an and I think that there's deep, I think that we have to look as a district at the way that we are serving. I think magnet school like DSA is in a different set of circumstances, and I think it's really, I'm going to tell you right now, it's really difficult to run buses everywhere. And I think that I think that it becomes who gets transportation and how do you decide where those buses are going. But I think the other thing I will say is that kind of increased resource availability is there's kind of a chicken or egg thing that happens there too, where buses are expensive to run, and I think that needs to be a part of a larger conversation, and a critical part of it. No, we don't. That's certainly true.
We'll go back to previous chart. So that's the last time was 2025. We're in 2026. And, the way I understand things is that those students in 6th grade in 2026, that 34% are going to be in 7th grade and so on. Okay. So what kind of projections is, I guess 2 questions. My understanding is that once you start getting into 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, the number of students that enroll in DSA drops off significantly. That most of the students that schools get are from younger students in 6th grade, say. So if that 6th grade number starts to drop, then there are not going to be so many 7th graders and then 8th graders, 9th graders, unless.
You're speaking my language. Yep. And Brian and I have actually had conversations about this dynamic too, where we can push growth, right? And it's growth in entry level grades. And I think about entry level grades here as 6th and 9th, and where that has to start, right? And if you're not well enrolled in 6th, you're going to see what our enrollment targets look like as I get further through this presentation. But we have an ambitious jump from 8th to 9th. So there is a real recruitment, there's real recruitment that needs to happen here. But you're absolutely right that kind of what you enroll or who you enroll, who you enroll in 6th and 9th grade, then plays out through the rest of, and that's numbers, and it's kind of the demographic fabric of the school. That's exactly right. And it's why I think, so when we're talking about recruitment strategies, to the question that we had online about what that looks like, it's going to classes where there are 5th graders and there are 8th graders, because those are the kids who are making choices. And we continue to see choice grow in our district. I think we saw, even with the declining enrollment context, I think we saw 6% growth in active participation in school choice this year, which is really interesting. And I think does bode well for choice only magnet type schools like DSA. Is the honest perspective there. But that's why I think if you're talking about effective recruitment strategies and where you look to start to change these demographic trends, you're looking at entry level grades, because those, once those kids are in the door, those are your kids for as long as they decide to stay.
Andrew, one more question from online. go back a slide. The question is, are there dropouts in certain grades or within certain majors? Like, where do we see, are there trends with dropouts?
I'm gonna be honest with you, I wish I had that data, and I don't have it, but.
I will say I don't have it at a major level piece, but generally our highest attrition is from 8th to 9th.
I know a little bit of it. Stagecraft loses kids because it's a ton more work than kids expect. And it's not always a right match. So Stagecraft definitely loses kids across all 4 years. I think we also lose sciencey kids between 10 and 11, kids who want AP physics, they want EC calculus, we lose some of those kids. And that's, I definitely know graduates who came here just for a year for music and are so freaking happy, like 20 years later, still identify as a DSA grad because of the 1 year that they had here. So from a DSA perspective, I think it makes sense for us to continue to reach out to high schoolers involved in our arts. Maybe they've discovered they've fallen in love with theater. They never did it before. Maybe they didn't know they loved stagecraft. Maybe they're shop kids and they like really want to build stuff and do that creative thing.
So that is true, that we see a large amount of attrition at that level. And you know, I will say that when we have looked at it, the loss between 8th and 9th grade is almost exclusively to comprehensive high schools, where I think that there is a wealth of additional. I mean, it doesn't have the depth and kind of distinct nature that DSA's exceptional programming has. And if you think about it, if you're talking about an East, if you're talking about I mean, any of our directional schools, right? Like you know, we're talking about schools that have 1,500, 2,000 kids. And I think that that's part of why I think that the growth is important, because those additional resources don't just provide the ability to kind of deepen commitment to the arts. It also means that you're able to provide more kind of a more robust experience for kids. What does it look like for us to unlock the potential across the way here in the Wildcat Center, where we, you know, are there kids who want athletics and arts, right? Like that's a real thing. And we have a college gym right across the street, or right across the way here. That we can't use because the building's not up to code. I'm going to talk about that in just a second, once I get there.
We also lose middle schoolers because Denver parents send their kids here to avoid what they feel are worse alternatives of middle school. So that's another part of it.
Yeah, I know that anecdotally, the landscape of middle school options, and anecdotally I've heard that, then you're going to DSA in middle school with no intention of staying in high school, because it's much better options.
Demographic. I mean, DSA has the reputation, and not even the reputation, there's more girls here than boys. So socially, you know, a lot of parents won't even consider DSA because socially they don't feel like you're going to get a good balance.
And I'm not trying to, you know, impose my own kind of lived experience in the context of school management on everybody's kind of personal experience. One thing I will say is that I also don't believe that we need to see 33% loss of kids from 8th to 9th grade is inevitable. That's an extraordinarily high number as a retention, as a kind of attrition. And I tell you that right now, right? Like it is multiples of what the district, kind of what a district average would look like. And again, Brian and I've had this conversation too. So that, you know, this is all kind of coming back around here, where like some of that is like, you go talk to every single one of those 8th grade families and say, we really want you to be a part of this community for high school. What's it going to take for you to say yes? Is the character of conversations that have worked for me in the past, personally, as a school leader. So like I said, I manage a real estate too, so I'm gonna talk about that in just a second. That's Mary Beth. I promise you're here I promise we're gonna get to you. And then I promise I'm here until 7. So I do, okay, I shared a lot of bad news, so far, and now we're gonna start sharing good news. So I think the good news is that we are projected to grow this year, and not by a little bit, by a statistically meaningful amount. And we're coming out of round choice. Round one of choice is deeply complicated. And like I said, I think both the kind of the advancement of the window and kind of additional efforts that the district has taken in a couple of different ways means that we saw remarkable even in a declining environment growth and participation in our choice process this year, which is really exciting for us. And I think that we saw that in part reflected here at DSA, where we're projected to grow. We're projecting to grow by 71 kids. And I'm pleased to say that, in the context of, Brian does not see his preliminary, Brian's going to see his preliminary list tomorrow. But I have seen all of our schools' preliminary lists. And I can tell you that kind of based on our initial data framework, I have a lot of optimism that we might not just meet, but with the right set of round two strategies. And I think Brian will talk in just a second about I'm interested in everybody kind of learning about the second round of auditions that we're going to open up around exceeding this number too. And I think that if we can get close to here, if we can get to that 1,100 number, that's a place that DSA hasn't been in 5 years, which would be really exciting for me, because as you talk about that, and then as you see the way that impacts school budgets, that it will unlock opportunities and resources for Brian and his team that might not necessarily be there otherwise. But here I did want to pass it to Brian briefly to talk about, I think both the kind of the growth and the way that he's approached enrollment and recruitment this year, and kind of some initial returns that we have around demographics.
I think there might be one after this slide. Did I put, oh, no, that's yours, okay. So, like Andrew said, there was some where we've been that didn't maybe sound so great, and now kind of where we're at and what we're looking at going forward. Going through the intentional recruitment strategies, as everyone kind of knows, the leadership team was mostly me this year. We had one returning AP. So we were unsure what recruitment looks like at DSA. So we tried some things. We got back on social media. We were very intentional of reaching out weekly to all of the district 5th grade families and all of the district 8th grade families with, here's what DSA does. Here's a link to our brochure so you can see about our majors. Here's some videos that BCA created for every major, so you can get an idea of what stagecraft looks like, what BCA looks like, what orchestra looks like. So we did that in the 4 weeks kind of leading, actually the 5 weeks leading to our open house. And the returns were promising. We know there's more for us to do in terms of recruitment. With our growth, it's going to give us some extra monies, hopefully, that we can start looking at where can we get some advertisements for DSA in the Parkville newspaper, in DCPA programs, in Arvada Center stuff, in the Pace Center in Parker, and really get the name of DSA out there some more. But the returns are promising this year, not just in terms of our projected growth, but our audition numbers. School choice was moved up this year. We had one fewer month to kind of get auditions done and everything, and we still had more students audition this year than we did last year. Not by a ton, by about 25. Sorry, not auditions, applications. We had more students apply this year than last year with one fewer month by about 25 to 30 families. We saw about 600 kids go through the audition process. We offered 289 seats. And if we can remember back a slide, where we're currently 38% minority students, our seat offers this year are 43%. So we're progressing, which again is a goal and objective of myself, my leadership team, of the whole school. We want to see more diversity at DSA, and we want to be thoughtful and intentional about that. So we're seeing some positive results from our recruitment and our outreach. And like Andrew said, our goal, our really ambitious goal, is to hit 1120. The district is fairly confident that we can hit 1092. We're thinking we can hit 1120 by reducing some of our attrition, which has involved having a current 8th grade family night and talking to those 8th grade families, being very intentional with our directors. Talk to your current 8th grade students about staying for 9th grade. see what's interesting them about East, about Northfield, about South. Oftentimes it's cultural, it's prom, it's pep rallies, it's spirit weeks, it's things like that that we can do here. We just need to think through it and try it. So it's those kind of conversations. Like I said, we're really shooting for 1120 internally, even though the district has us at 1092, and then building from that. Part of that is round 2 auditions this year. That was something that didn't happen last year, but we are going to have round 2 auditions. I'm working with the directors of those majors for what theirs will look like, so we can start pushing that out February 27th to families. Again, targeting specifically 5th grade, 8th grade, but across the board, but really targeting 5th grade and 8th grade to grow our middle school and really grow our high school. We have a lot of capacity in our high school, so really targeting 8th grade, getting to our middle schools around this area with that targeted messaging for round 2 auditions, which is going to be 7 of our 11 majors. Dance, creative writing, visual arts, and theater are pretty full for our current staffing, but our other 7 majors, we have room. We want to utilize the Irvine and Young partnership. This is a very exciting pathway we have coming, elective we have coming in partnership with the Irvine and Young group to get students who maybe are kind of passionate about their art, but really interested in this entrepreneurial aspect and getting a chance to do this design thinking and this challenge-based learning. And let's get them in the door, and then let's hold on to it. We are getting middle schoolers who don't want to go to another middle school. So my middle school options are bad. I'll use DSA for 3 years, and then I'm going to opt out. What I want to do is once we get them, let's hold on to it. Let's show them that, like, actually DSA is pretty cool. Let's stay here. I know you came in wanting to go to Northfield, wanting to go to East, but let's use our 3 years we have them to hook them. And that's all part of the ongoing process we're looking through, what we're talking about. Visual arts. So those 4 are at capacity for our current staffing and directors.
This is I think in addition, in design by grandparents, there's this like super like targeted outreach when you have, here's the 6 instruments that like one of the things I helped our band teacher do was curate a list of private lesson teachers and neighborhood music standing and other music things, because some of these, you're trying to pull a spot that's really specific.
Right.
Yeah. Depends on the major, but I mean, like an additional challenge on top of all the other challenges. If you're like recruiting, or we don't have anyone who sings bass, or we don't have any players.
Yep. And that's another layer of complexity.
Yeah, there's just, I mean, and I've been working with parent volunteer on some of that, really working it out. The food association, how esoteric is that? I mean, it's very hard to continue. So I'm going to where the people are. I think previously, DSA kind of was in a position of like, well, we don't need to. Everyone wants to come to us. And get a little bit relaxed. You get a little bit relaxed.
Yeah.
Like, now we have to.
And so there was some definitely concerning trends, and like Andrew's talking about at a district level, at a DSO historical level, but we're coming around a bend, and we're seeing hopeful signs for our future, and we are committed. I am committed. My leadership is committed. Our staff is committed to growing DSA. That is something we are committed to, and knowing that we need to go out and sell DSA. We are no longer in a place where we can sit back and just wait for them to find us. And so we are aware of that, and we're talking about and identifying what is the best way to do that moving forward.
You've been waiting patiently.
No, it's on topic, but So my child came from a K-8 school, and so we made the really difficult break from that to come to DSA. And I know that it's almost the flip, right? From 8 to 9, it's like a much easier break. Kids aren't like planning on that continuity, and that was a huge part of why we went to a K-8 school, is because we were educated on how valuable that continuous education was.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like, I'm a DPS kid. I went all the way through DPS from kindergarten through high school. And I know K-8s are newer from after I graduated. How many 6 through 12 schools are there in DPS? And is there like similar studies?
3, Bruce, MLK, and us.
Okay.
We have,
And do they have similar retention problems from 8th to 9th? I'm very
I would
curious.
no, they don't.
No, they don't. Okay.
Restate the question. People aren't hearing it.
Yep, so the question there was, is how prevalent are 6 through 12 schools in DPS? And then kind of, do they experience similar attrition from 8 to 9? I think the answer is not particularly prevalent, right? Like, and there are more that I think we've got. I mean, I would have to look at my map, and I would actually say we probably have around 10. And including Kunzmiller, which is another art school, right? Like, and I think we've got charters who have kind of a 6 through 12 continuum. We've got, so what I would say is that the level of attrition that we see from 8th to 9th here is
Okay. And are there similar study? Like I said, I went through, choice and chose a K-8. We're kind of inundated during those like early meetings with how beneficial, what the studies say about kids starting and going all the way through middle school and this one continuous. And I haven't heard the same thing about 6 to 12. Are there like studies, or is that another way to kind of start the discussion at the 6th grade point, so that families are like, oh, we're in this all the way,
So you're asking great questions, and questions that I do have, but it might not be the answers that we're hoping for. In that I do think K-8 and 6 through 12 models are hard to run. And you need exceptional school leaders, to be able to do it. I think, as someone who has worked in schools at each the middle, elementary, middle, and high school level, can tell you that they're very different environments. And I think that a kind of a unique specialized program like the one that we have here at DSA, affords a degree of clear continuity and benefit of, I mean, if you think about it, you're deepening your practice, you're deepening your expertise in this thing that you're here to do, right, over the course of that time. And in total transparency, I think that we have some of our performance issues. Fortunately, we have a vast majority of DPS schools are green schools, and well performing. But I think 6 through 12s are a place where we have some work to do in other places in the district. That's just me being totally honest about what I see in the data. We reported that on that strategic regional analysis this year. But fortunately, I don't think that's a dynamic that we have to deal with here at DSA. I actually think that this is an example of a program where it makes a lot of sense for kids to be in one place for 7 years, because of what we're trying to do here. I know people want to hear about buildings too, so we're going to get there in just a second. So this I think illustrates my level of optimism about what the breadth and the reach that DSA has throughout the DPS system, and particularly on the east side of the city, right? Like, so this kind of west side of the city is notable absence to me. What I will say is that right around here is Kunzmiller Creative Arts Academy. So we do have a 6-12 arts program in Southwest Denver. Much lower enrolled than we have here, but actually got to go see their fall production this past year, and they have a lot of really exciting stuff going on there as well. The one thing that I'll tell you that you don't see here is the hundreds of the 100+ kids that we're getting from out of district. So families who are coming from Commerce City, you might not even see your dot on the map here, but this every dot here is a DSA student. And this, if you zoom out, and I didn't have a chance to put that on this slide, But if you zoom out, the dots extend all the way down to Parker, and all the way up to, kind of through Jeffco and, kind of the entire North Metro area. And it's not, so I do think that out of district reach, to the point that somebody asked about earlier, is a real strength of the program. And I think speaks to how much weight the name of the program carries throughout the entire metro area, and not just DPS. So what does the vision look like moving forward? And I think here's where I'm going to talk about buildings. DPS did acquire 4 buildings, including this one on the Mosaic campus of former Johnson and Wales. We all know this used to be at one point was DU Law School, at one point was Colorado Women's College. At one point was Johnson and Wales. Johnson and Wales shut down, around 2020 during pandemic time. It's actually really interesting if you go to some of the buildings that, I'm going to talk about how much work we have to do in some of those places in just a second. But it's really like a ghost town, like people just left, right? Like it left a lot of stuff behind. So it's really kind of an interesting exercise to see what it looks like when a college vacates. The people leave, but not necessarily all the stuff does. So kind of fun. If people are interested in that, I think that's actually something that we could do at some point. So DPS acquired 4 buildings, Mosaic campus, to support expansion of Denver School of the Arts in 2021. And that, during the time that was happening, I think the 1,700, Melanie in her article this year today cited 1,700. I've heard 2,000 a lot from members of the DSA community over the course of the past couple of years as a growth goal. And I'm just going to tell you right now that in this context, I don't think that's happening. So 2,000 feels like that feels unrealistic to me. We have, and I think that compels kind of an evolving perspective on what kind of optimal state over the long run of Denver School of the Arts looks like. And I think what we've landed on is that we feel like a responsible growth goal is 1,400. That's what we've communicated to Brian. And it's our expectation as a district for the school. And I think, Brian and I have been working in active partnership, and other members of the central office team have been working with Brian around what it looks like to chart a path to 1,400. I can tell you that if we get from 1010 and change to 1092 or 1,100 this year, we are in really good shape for that growth goal over time. I think it matters that we, to the point that you made earlier, that we see particular gain in entry level grades, and that's where we want to go. And I think obviously focus on growth in all majors. I think it is notable that there are 4 majors, and when you look at the audition data, it's audition and enrollment, where there are 4 majors where there is overwhelmingly disproportionate interest. And I'm not suggesting that there's anything lesser about the other majors, but if you're talking about growth, in some sense, you have to be responsive to demand. So I think that's the level of data that we're trying to get to around understanding what people want and how we can give more people what they want in terms of their DSA experience. And so to support that growth, I think the vision here, I'm going to get to that kind of a map of the campus in just a second, but the vision is for this building and the building next door to be DSA High School. And for across Montview to be DSA Middle School, so to have a kind of a clear separation. But I know that kind of crossing the street, that would make me nervous as a parent, to be totally honest with you. And I think that there's a good argument to be made for. I don't want to suggest that we're segregating the schools and holding them. I do think I'm curious for Brian's perspective on this, but still want kind of a unified culture around this is Denver School of the Arts. And the reality is that if we were to build out this building that we're sitting in or that you all are sitting in, I'm standing in right now, that we're all in right now, then we would have enough room to be able to do this here, and for every teacher to have their own specialized space, et cetera. And when we did go part way there in the last bond, but the reality is that when we did this, and I wasn't here for this, I just want to say that right now, but when we did this, I think that we thought we spent $30 million on the buildings, and the phrase that Melanie used in her article today was that it was projected that it was kind of turnkey. That's not the case. So these buildings are not up to code. I mean, this building is now, fortunately, up to code code requirements for higher education and for K-12 education are very different. And we're talking many millions of dollars different. I'm, like I said, I wasn't here. Just want to be super clear about that. And I do think that what happened here is DPS spent $30 million on buildings, that it then costs 40, 50, $60 million to fully activate. And that's a very different investment, and a very different investment where in talking about a contracting budget environment, talking about when we go out for a bond, we're thinking about the $2 billion of backlog maintenance that we have as a district that we need to source for too. And thinking about equity for all schools and thinking about, all of our schools getting attention in the context of each of those bonds. Tell you right now, $60 million is a really hard sell for one, as special as this community is. We did get part of the way there. So, the $20 million in the previous bond, not the 2020 bond, that was associated with this is the reason why we're in this building right now and why we have classes operating out of this building. And there are tens of millions of dollars left to go. For this campus to be activated for K-12 students to even be able to walk into buildings, for lack of a better way of putting it. Watley Chapel, just across the way, been in there, is an actively unsafe environment. I did not feel healthy when I left, and that's the reality. Like I'm not trying to but that's just the reality of what it is. So what does this look like? So what is this? So our goal here is 1,400. You see kind of why I'm emphasizing the need for, and why Brian and I have talked so much about the need to recruit from 8th to 9th, because you do need, you need 80 more kids in 9th grade than you've got in 8th grade, and we're losing 33% of kids out of 8th grade right now. So it's a retention issue and it's a recruitment issue at 8th grades, kind of in the surrounding area. Pleased to say that Brian gets it and is actively working in service of those goals. But when we're at 1,400, and I'm going to say when we're at 1,400, now if we get to 1,400, this is what the composition of the school is going to look like. You see kind of this drop off over the course because it's really hard. It's hard to get kids in 10th, 11th, 12th once kids are moving through that process. What does the campus look like? So like I said, the goal is, so this is kind of the DSA that's been in place for a long time. The goal is for that to be the middle school. So this is the building we're in right here. We're sitting right about there, and kind of here. And then the building just across the way is the Wildcat Center, which is where that gym is. And I think in the context of our kind of visioning around what space expansion can look like, where we would like to build out additional dance space. I think there's also, it's again kind of fun to walk in there. There's what was obviously a food court for the kids at Johnson and Wales. I can see what I'm talking about, and you can see you can picture a college food college dining hall where there's like different stations, different things. All that to say, that just this building across the way needs $3-4 million in last year's money, pre the latest round of inflation, just to get up to code. So kids we are legally prohibited from running regular programming out of this building because it's not code compliant for K-12, and that's just the reality of what we're dealing with. Building that we're in right now. There is a lot of space, so there's a lot of space in this building, a lot of space that we have finished in this building with that kind of $20 million bond investment that we talked about. And there's even more space that needs to be finished. I think we can get, I forget what the number is. I should have had this before. I think we can get, upwards of 20 additional classrooms out of the building that we're in right now. And I'm sure you can imagine, I've been here during the day. There's not kids, I think it feels much more crowded across the street than it does over here. And that's the reality of it. So, even in the context of what we've got right now, I do believe that with the kind of latest round of, with this building being activated, I believe that there's growth potential, and we're seeing that even before we do this additional work. So we talk about growth potential, even what we've gotten here, if you add 20 classrooms on top of that, I think 1,400 feels very comfortable. Between these two environments. Then DPS did purchase 2 additional buildings. So we got the actively unsafe chapel that I was talking about over there. And when I say asbestos, I mean asbestos. And it's everywhere in there, and it's not a great environment. I think that's the one that we are interviewing. And it's my job to negotiate this lease in total transparency. I've been negotiating it for the better part of a year because I'm not comfortable with the terms that we're at yet. And I think that the terms for me that are really important here is availability and access. for the DSA community and protection for, if we're entertaining what it looks like to lease this building out to a church, and that we have legal protection associated, you know, and the idea here is that we lease the building out, and that church is able to put the money into it that it takes to activate it. Because I'll tell you right now, just based on the, that's fourth in line in the $60 million that we're talking about, we're not going to get there. Tell you what, that's just not going to happen if DPS is the one who has to fundraise for it, which is why I believe that kind of activating this via external investment is our best path. It is really important to us as a district. I know it's really important to Brian as a leader and to this community for this to be a safe and inclusive community for everybody. And we're seeking kind of strong legal protections for the district in the context of a lease agreement. That's why it's taken, I'm still going back and forth with these folks about what that looks like. And then
you're talking about the church, and you just said asbestos.
Yep.
There has to be mitigation, and that's a dangerous and scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, to try and mitigate and get the asbestos out of them.
And extraordinarily expensive. And why I want somebody else to pay. And it's why I want somebody else to pay for it, for lack of a better way, because like, and we can get away with only mitigating, things that we open up ourselves. But I tell you right now, like even the tile on the floor around the pews, if you pull up any of the tile, it is everywhere. Every space in that building is vulnerable to it, and it's why I feel like external investment is our only path forward to activating it.
I'm curious.
I'm going to get to it. That's why I'm Denver Presbyterian Church.
Oh, okay.
So, and then this Emily Griffith Technical College is, a 109-year-old institution, has 1.5 million alumni in the Denver metro area. And at 1,400, I can tell you, we could build this place out for DSA. We wouldn't have anybody over there. Even at 14, at 2, you could go higher than that. And I can tell you that we don't need the space for the expansion that we're seeking here. And one thing that is true is that, Emily Griffith Technical College is one of the most, talk about two storied institutions in the context of the fabric of the Denver community. If you can't walk down any street in Denver without coming across the GTC alumni. And I mean that, right? Like the reach is broad and expansive. And I think that the goal here is to take, so Emily Griffith Technical College is, one of their main bases of operations is out of our downtown building right now, which is really hard from an accessibility standpoint for students and really limiting from a space perspective. I think the goal here is that, and we have a contractor, a design architect and a contractor on board. Around imminent activation of this space. So the goal is to have Emily Griffith Technical College kind of move their base of operations here for during the 2027 year. And I think that there's I think we are hiring a new executive director for Emily Griffith Technical College right now. So it's kind of think about it as a subsidiary of DPS. Brian, I'm telling you right now, once that person's on board, that person and yourself will be bringing you together to figure out what kind of opportunities from meeting our equity targets, from kind of accessibility to career and technical education for students. And I think this is going to require us to get creative, but what does it look like to unlock opportunities even for DSA students in the context of what's happening at EGTC? And that is a program who I'm telling you right now does not have equity problems in terms of the demographics of who is making up that community. I think my vision for this campus is vibrant with these two, I think vibrant teaming with life in the context of all of these buildings. With two of the most important institutions in Denver, that's not Denver School of the Arts and Emily Griffith Technical College. Successfully co-located together with all the space that they need to thrive. Is what I truly, and I would not be here today. I don't believe in telling people things that I don't believe. I truly believe that that's possible through the right combination of things. I realize I've talked a lot about the buildings, and I know that we have questions. Let's go there.
I have a comment from the previous slide and then a question and comment. Focusing on operating in your space on rent data for auditions. Recalling our previous conversation about the impact of the pandemic on kids don't learn. Elementary schools don't have fans.
Yep.
My kids went to Teller Elementary School. Award-winning band teacher did not teach any big instruments for at least 2 years. So there are not incoming students. So I'm just gonna put that out there as a request to consider other factors, not just current audition numbers as popular majors. I have data on band, but it doesn't mean that band isn't popular. It means you have to work harder, as there was several years in the pandemic for kids who are going to get band second round auditions. It's all in instruments.
And the beauty of our budgeting process is that it happens every year.
Yeah.
Mary Beth is laughing at me. And what I would say is like, I don't mean responsive to demand now. I mean responsive over time, right? Like, and I think that's what the role, that's what the role of a good school leader looks like in the context of budgeting process. When we see that rebound, when more kids are coming in, as a result, our expectation will be that we meet we meet that moment when that moment arrives.
I think lower numbers in band, I don't think reflects that band is less popular. I think it's a
less accessible
specific art that is taking longer to rebound from the pandemic.
Yep.
Okay.
No.
On the map, at some point, I think there was discussion about somebody or another using the third floor office spaces in this building. Is that still on the table? Am I remember this correctly?
I think so. That the organization who we have talked to about that is here. So Mary Beth, welcome. But that's my area. So I'm the right person to direct questions to about that. And I would say that that's very much up in the air right now. And I think that, as we're talking about what activation plans look like across the board, I think, Mary Beth and I had a meeting at like 10 a.m. this morning about what different options could look like that feel responsive to what I will say is that even if that happened, we're talking about an office area that we don't, like I said, I think everybody can spread out in the context of the plans that we have, not, that's, so I'm the right person to direct that to. And I would say that I would far from final, right? Like, I think we are actively exploring what other options there look like.
Is the district thinking, and I heard you say this a little bit, but I'm just looking at the program list for Emily Griffith. You're thinking about expansion for DSA, absurdly high load that stagecraft majors at this school will carry, which I think is bigger than it should be for both the teachers and the students.
Yep.
And wondering whether in an expansion like this, there's like arts synergy. So sure, it sounds like maybe a kid can take a welding class or something like that, but is there also any thought to things going the other way? Because our stagecraft majors lead basically with an associate degree in the theater tech space. Is there space for expanding that in Emily Griffith and using that to support some of the stuff that happens at DSA? So our stagecraft majors have an opportunity to be artists while they're here and not doing things like handling and making chairs for graduation. Or stuff.
I think Brian and I'm the least person. I tell you right now, I'm the least qualified person in this room to talk about the details of arts programming. And what I can, so I will say a couple of things. One, it's going to be a little bit of a Tetris game to get their existing programming into this building. So I think that entity, I think they could, right? Like, but that entity, for which I also manage the real estate, would need to look at other acquisition opportunities. If we're even in the context of the campus itself, for us to be able to expand and kind of ideate on what additional programming looks like, whether and kind of the role of stagecraft in the context of the program itself. I sense Brian's probably better positioned than I am to speak about that, because
I mean, what I would say is kind of like Andrew mentioned,
There's no executive director yet for EGTC, so those conversations haven't occurred. That doesn't, they won't occur. It's an interesting idea. When they staff that position and we start looking at how we department, it's something to explore.
Mary Beth.
Hi.
Mary Beth has been exceptionally patient, has waited an hour and 25 minutes for her chance.
For my one slide, you
For your
guys.
one slide. But I do think she probably has the most exciting slide that we've got. So this is Mary Beth Lawson. I'm Vice President of the Denver Public Schools Foundation. And is here to talk to us about the Ivan and Young partnership. While you talk, I'm actually going to run to the restroom.
Yeah. You just move to my slide.
Got it.
Great. So I'm sure you all saw the press release and know a little bit about the Ivy and Young partnership. I don't really have too much more to share. It is moving forward. I know that, course sequencing and all of that stuff is moving along. I'm not in those conversations. I know the principal here is, as is the principal at Manual. I'm very excited about the partnership. I've been involved in the conversation since the very beginning. And I think I had a meeting with them at 9 a.m. this morning. And again, it's teaching students to think innovatively. And as Chad in the back there likes to say, future-proof their careers and what they go on and do after they graduate from here. And so the role of the foundation is to facilitate the philanthropy to make that happen through partnerships, through dollars, through everything. And I'm here to answer questions about what that looks like. It is being run through the foundation, the DPS Foundation, and not the Friends Foundation. I am in partnership with them. I meet with them and talk with Susan, and we don't share databases. I'm not going to start emailing DSA Friends Foundation donors, and some of the conversations I have been having are with DSA parents because they care and are excited and reached out to me proactively, or I knew them from other conversations that I've had, but it is not where I'm proactively reaching out to them or doing any of that. But my door is open, my email inbox is open, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I think we did have one very online that I think kind of plays into this. But essentially people are wanting to know, how are we funding this expansion? And so I think it's that twofold piece in terms of the per pupil funding, which Brian can talk to, and then some of the building, which this will bring it.
Yes, and I think we are part of the Ivy and Young partnership comes with dollars from Ivy and Young themselves, that we should have some of those preliminary numbers in the next couple of weeks. And that is like a 4-year commitment with dollars committed every year for the expansion and launch of that program. They fund a lot of the needs, like the technology needs. And then we are looking at partners to help with the exciting programmatic needs and other things that could come.
Exciting what?
Programmatic needs and exciting additional access points to people in industry and guest lecturers and things like that that could come with the program. So it's definitely a twofold approach. There is some need around the capital needs that you address that comes with the funding of that. And some of the Ivy and Young funding does cover that and was mentioned in the conversations today. But it's still very early in the conversation around final numbers and what that looks like, and a lot of that will depend on enrollment and what student growth.
Will we be able to get a look at the final numbers and what things look like in terms of, what's going to be done and, what it's going to look like?
Are you saying, so I'm not involved in the curriculum, so I don't know if you're speaking to curriculum or if you're speaking to like,
I'm not talking about
okay.
curriculum.
Just like,
I said, what are the final numbers going to look like as it pertains to monies and what this is going to cost? And all the things that actually, I know about the pupil funding, but I'm talking about, the parts that the pupil funding that take care of.
yeah, I will say that I think a lot of it is iterative and generates, like, as it builds, it doesn't actually cost that much to launch the program. And a lot of that funding comes with the Ivy and Young partnership and is determined as the partnership grows, as enrollment grows, as things grow. There's then coaching for staff and things like that that come with the Ivy and Young partnership. I think we'll know more as the program grows and evolves. And it is a 2-school program. It is not just at DSA, it is also at Manual. So those needs shift. The needs here are very different than the needs at Manual. Ivy and Young has schools throughout the country, in Atlanta, in LA, they're opening one in New York, they have one in Miami, and those are much more like what Manual school and what it will look like at the rollout at Manual, whereas DSA is new and different from what they've done in the past.
Upper grade is in high school.
to build the pathway. We.
And I'm gonna interject with that too. There's a lot of comments online as, what does it look like? How can we make sure our kids are involved in the program?
Yeah.
You can speak a little bit to what it's gonna look like.
Yeah, so
And how, why we're 6-9, how people can be involved.
right, so the curriculum, I finding that has never worked with an art school, so we're kind of creating the system with them and their expertise. And so we're starting 6, 7, 8, 9 to build a pathway up to that 12th grade capstone piece. So putting a 12th grade student next year right into an Irvine young course is effective for achieving the outcomes and goals, because they wouldn't have had the prior years of curriculum to get there. So we're starting in our 6 through 9 to build that up so that by the time our 9th graders become 12th graders, they will have had access to it 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th to build up all the skills they need for that 12th grade garage experience capstone piece.
So do they have a pre-existing curriculum that we're bringing in and adapting?
We are designing.
Yeah.
So is it like a class that each student will take, or is it woven through various classes?
No, it is an elective class they will take. So every 6th, 7th, and 8th grader will take it. 9th graders, it is an elective choice they can take, and then 10th grade we will add it, 11th grade we will add it, 12th grade we will add it, and then it'll be 6th through 12th.
So is it gonna replace enrichment?
Sorry?
Is it gonna replace enrichment?
Enrichment being
The, like-
advisory?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Initially,
Advisory,
yes.
sorry.
Initially,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so they'll be required to take.
In 6th, 7th, and 8th. Yes. Every 6th, 7th, and 8th grade will have access to this class. 9th grade, it will be an elective choice that we are going to get. We want to get 179 credits. Our growth goal for next year is 205.
Is it, there are more details about the Irvine and Young plans of the CS units that are available on the website? Correct.
Yes.
So, little flexibility with CSC units because there's more information there.
We've talked about various CSC meetings and we'll continue to talk about it at a depth that's just not possible at the time. To go back to the DSA side of the funding question, we are planning to pick up the sustainability as this build out happens initially. From the school-based side, we are focusing on funding the human capital. So we will be hiring 4 teachers next year to cover 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And then that piece of it. And we're looking to external funding for help with the non-human capital around the technology, the building activation, all of that. And that is also detailed in CSC minutes from our budget meetings in January. Thanks very much.
And putting that.
And one thing I will say is I heard questions around kind of what fundraising looks like goes to here. The program is obviously a critical part of it. And I think that, the idea here is to harness kind of the power of what's happening here from a program standpoint, to drive that growth goal. And I think for that growth goal to be realized, to tell you right now, right, we can get a couple years out of the space that we have. And there will be an urgent need for capital investment in this building and the building next door, Wildcat Center, for this to be kind of fully realized as in the way that I think it needs to be.
It seems like the Irvine and Young partnership is another like hopefully reason for kids to stay into high school, right? If there's a capstone
Yeah.
project.
So there's an 8th grade capstone and there's a 12th grade capstone, and we're excited by the possibilities offered to the partnership to create just another hook in addition to the majors, in addition to the academics, in addition to all of that, for students to stay with us the full 7 years.
And then for those of us who, who have kids who are working at Nickelodeon because of the amazing, the amazing program that they were supported with here, and like what it looks like to make a career in the arts. I think that's the other component. I think Mary Beth probably said something about this, and I double underscore it, right? Like that I think kind of the entrepreneurship and the business component of this is a really big deal in the context of this programming, where it's, what does it mean to harness the passion you've cultivated in the context of DSA and your education here, and make a life out of it. And I think that connective tissue feels really, that to me is a really exciting component of this, independent of the kind of robust program opportunities that come. We've finally finished our slides.
Let's go ahead and we'll move forward. If there are from our online participants, I know I've got a couple questions I've held, but if any of you do have additional questions at this time, if you want to throw them in the chat, or our online participants can scan the QR code and put questions in there as well. And I know we've answered most of the questions as they've come, but really just a dedicated time here for any lingering questions. So online, if you want to throw them in there, I'll be monitoring both the chat and this form. So, but I think one of kind of the lingering questions, Brian, if you can kind of address, and I'm going to summarize what from several comments in here.
Okay.
People are curious kind of how we plan to grow when we already have full classes. We're looking at classes of 35 in middle school. We're looking at our big 4 vision top down. What is the process by which we're going to achieve this goal of 1,400 when we're already capped out?
Yep.
What majors can we grow? What grades can we grow? How do we get more teachers? The question was, well, can't DPS just give us more teachers? I think not having that understanding of per pupil funding and schooling. So if you could kind of just talk about all of that.
So it's both simple and extremely complex. If we can get the students, we can get the teachers that will allow us to grow. And that's continuing conversations between Andrew's team and mine, showing that we are doing our recruitment and we are getting our auditions and our applications so that when it's time to make the budget in January, we will be projected at a high enough number that we can then add the staff to sustain that growth. And that growth can be across all 11 majors. So if we grow significantly in the high school, we can look at adding more directors in majors that are at capacity right now, which then increases the capacity in that major. We can look at targeting some of our lower enrolled majors at the moment and expanding their capacity with that director and bringing on academic teachers to handle that academic side that wouldn't increase class size. So it is really, if we can show we're getting the students, then we can get the budget to get the staff.
And what I will say is we have proof that works because we did it this year. So this projections number, I should have probably contextualized what this is. So my team makes this number for kind of generates this number for every school and every grade level in the district. It's not a perfect process. I'm sure you can imagine where like there's a lot that goes into this and is somewhat reliant on kind of how things have happened in the past and expecting those things to continue to happen in the future. But this, so us projecting, so this projection is not necessarily, this was us saying, this is what we believe that we can comfortably substantiate for growth this upcoming year and allocated budget accordingly. So for these 71 additional kids, this is us giving Brian and his team 71 additional kids worth of funding by saying we believe that you can grow accordingly. And then we also have processes that where, kind of additional processes where we have kind of additional growth targets. We're never going to change it's really important for me in the integrity of our projections process that we don't change just because we want to kind of manufacture growth. And we need to be able to substantiate the demand to be able to do it. But if there's a particularly enterprising principal, like Brian, who believes that they can go higher than this, then we have kind of other structures, kind of loan structures where we say we're going to give you the funding for these additional kids, but if you don't get the kids, you got to pay it back. But I think when we're able to do that, when we see that, then we are able to project further, kind of further growth, and then kind of the budget. Then so projections goes to budget conversations, which determines kind of the staffing allocations that Brian gets. The other thing that I did want to say is I want to double underscore for any of you who might have well-heeled friends, 35 kids in a class and we don't have space for it. It's a real thing, right? Like 1,400 is going to be, it would be tight. And with what we've got right now, and it's why I think the fundraising goal associated with this and the kind of completion of what DSA space and exclusively in this building and parts of this building looks like, because we can't do it all. In terms of this growth goal, it will peter out if we're not able to do this. And I can tell you, we do not have the resources as a district to be able to make those discretionary investments, capital investments right now. And it's just kind of the reality of losing 1,500, 2,000 kids a year. What we talked about at the beginning, but that we're cutting too, and discretionary stuff gets harder, which is why the fundraising and the kind of role of the Ivy and Young partnership and the DPS Foundation is so critical to our ability to kind of realize that vision. But we do not. The idea is not to stuff 400 additional kids into the existing space. Let's put it that way.
And to give us specific to that question, so like Andrew said, we have an example, we're doing it. That 71 kids growth and projection is allowing us to fund 5 positions for next year that we aren't funding currently this year. 2 of them we currently have through a budget assistance process, and 3 of them are new positions, but those 2 are essentially new funded positions. So we demonstrate that we can get students here and students want to go here and we're going to get them. We then get the money in January to hire for the following school year. Then, like Andrew said, if we don't hit that goal, we owe money back. So that's the calculus we're running every year.
I would love to project DSA to next year, not next year's budget cycle, but we need the demonstrated growth and demand to be able to.
Another question is if you can speak to which majors are at capacity and which majors and grades still have room to grow.
So our majors that are really at capacity are going to be dance, creative writing, visual arts, and theater. Every other major has some room to grow. And I don't have my round 1 numbers yet. Like Andrew said, I'll get those tomorrow. But from seat offers, we have some room in every middle school grade. And by some room, it's probably a handful of seats in each grade. We have significantly more room in the high school grades, but I don't have an exact number.
Hold on, I've got to make it so I can see my whole screen, see the whole question. So someone would like to learn more about how DSA fits into the district's vision for regional art centers that are being developed at several other schools with funding from the 2024 bond.
So what I would say about that is that DPS, I think DSA is one of one. Is one thing that's really important to note. I'm not suggesting that we're going to have DSAs everywhere. I do think that and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, around kind of student distribution across, like like I said, I've spent time in the Coons-Miller community, have a lot of fondness for the Coons-Miller community, even though we closed their elementary school last year. What I can tell you is that really important for us as a district, to have a vibrant 6-12 continuum in Coons-Miller, and, one of our historically most, under-resourced, and underserved communities, Southwest Denver, at a chronic societal level. It's really important to me that DPS does need to provide programming in regions without kids feeling like they have to leave. And I'm not suggesting that DSA isn't kind of the centerpiece of the district art strategy, associated with it. I'm not our arts director is the other thing, right? Like, and I think next time we do this, probably need an arts director here. And what I would say is, from Southwest Denver, and Coons-Miller, and the role, and then kind of the role and the pride that school has in the context of their of the Southwest Denver community, and then far northeast is another one, right? Like, and that's where we're kind of building out RAZA, where responsive arts, and that will be a K-8 in the end. So not really exactly what we're trying to do here. I think the idea there is to build an arts pipeline, starting with the very youngest kids. Could those kids after 8th grade become those kids who we're looking for in terms of the growth from that we need to, where's my slide here? This 165 to 245. I think that's a great candidate for a great grad. That we won't be offering 8th grade there for another couple of years. We're just building that out now. And I think that, the idea that students don't have to travel all the way across the city to have access to arts programming, even if it's not quite what we offer at DSA, is really important to us as a district. I think, I in the context of the access to that I see a lot of mobility across the district, and kids having to chase programming, that's an ethical issue for me, to be totally transparent. Like, I think it's wrong when the district messages that kids in this area want this, but we're not going to provide it. You have to go over there to get what you're looking for. So I do think that kind of a regional arts strategy is really important. I'm probably not the right person to talk about the programming aspects of that. And that's, really, from a 6-12 model, and we're really talking about DSA and Coons-Miller are our centerpieces here, with DSA, being enrolled, several times more than Coons-Miller, even at what we've got today. I think that answers the question.
One more here. Someone's curious if we factored the Sundance Film Festival moving to Boulder as a possible collaborative and marketing opportunity.
Oh, that is conversations that are taking place. I have not been in the early conversations. It was still while interim were in place, but I'm working on getting up to speed. But that is something we're very interested in pursuing.
At one point, there was talk about expanding the types of majors and maybe having a culinary major. Is that, and I thought maybe of some others, is that off the table? Are we thinking we know what majors are at DSA?
I would say nothing's off the table at the moment, but that's not at the top of the list of conversations we're in right now.
EGTC has culinary programming is one thing that I would say. So the technical college, and I'm not saying that we're serving the same student body, because those are it's really a higher education institution. So you're thinking about it really more as a pathway. That would be something that I would expect them to try to replicate here. They cook and serve food out of our downtown office. It's quite good, and I think that I don't want to speak for EGTC, but I do think that kind of bringing some of they're running a barber shop and a cafe out of the downtown office, and I know, is there a spot?
You got facial treatment?
And I think that, you know, in the interest of kind of a vibrant campus culture collectively that we're, you know, I think we have talked to EGTC about what does it look like to then bring services of that nature run by EGTC students into the Mosaic campus too.
Is EGTC connected, I'm sorry, to the Providing Young partnership at all?
They are not.
Is there any thought of that being part of, I don't know, capstone entrepreneurship stuff?
It hasn't been part of the conversations, but it doesn't mean it won't be. I think we're really focused. I think DSA was new and exciting to Ivy and Young. They've done things that they're doing at Manual, but they've never done it in arts, and given who they are, Dr. Dre and Jimmy Ivy, and they were excited about the arts inclusion. And I think that's the boundary so far of the opportunity, but that doesn't mean it can't stay.
You see some interesting entrepreneurship things.
And I think it's important that we get this right is the other thing that I would say. Go ahead.
Similar to that question, I know that I feel like I've heard that there's some conversations around either like sports or study stage or something like that, even if perhaps an opportunity to address still on the table, and what that look like?
I mean, Ken, everything is off the table.
Yeah.
A lot of it is staffing and budget.
That's what I was-
So, in terms of kind of prioritization of conversations,
Yeah.
adding majors is lower on the list right now than fully building out the majors we have and making sure, we're heading towards that 1400.
We're gonna plug into like stabilized band. A little band bias back here. It's not that it's unpopular.
I apologize for my language.
I know.
I will address it in the future.
Second like for this.
No, I know.
Everybody belongs.
And like I said, my own kids were, you know, that they played instruments. So.
I'm choosing yours, all good.
Can we go forward a slide? So I think just as we're wrapping up tonight, for both our online participants as well as our in-person participants, we would love to hear your feedback tonight. If you do want to scan the QR code, it's not just like this is what went well, but we want to hear about what are your hopes, what are your dreams for DSA, what is your vision? You know, where do you still have questions? What else are we asking? I forget, but just a lot of different things. So we want to hear from you. You know, what concerns do you still have lingering? What excites you about this expansion? So please do take the opportunity to fill out the feedback. And if you have more questions that come later on, another opportunity for you to ask questions. So I think we still have like 8 minutes if we still have lingering questions, but do want to make sure we put this plug in for both online as well as in-person participants tonight.
And if they come when you can't find the form, you're always welcome to email me directly. My email's on the website.
I'm sorry. As you're thinking about moving the high school entirely to this building, there are some things that the music students, for instance, don't have here, like practice rooms. Is there a plan for involving the students to be able to communicate, hey, these are the things that are really critical to us that we don't have? I can tell you my kid lost 2/3 of her time in chamber music a year ago because they spent so much time waiting for the bass player to schlep the bass back and forth across campuses. One of the bass players fault, but there's some logistics things that are not adequate now from an arts perspective. And is that on the radar screen of needs?
I hate to go back to the building thing again, but I think all of that is, I think there is vision for building out, you know, in the context of what would be built out, assuming we can identify and secure the funding to do it. Believe that that's possible to kind of minimize the need for kids to cross Montview in order, I mean, I'm not saying that every space is going to be exactly replicated on each side of the street, And I think that there is a lot of space in this building that can and would be activated should that funding, should we reach our fundraising goals associated with that in this building. So I do think that it is possible to build those things out within the footprint that we've got here. And we just need the money to do it.
But even in the way that it's being done now, if you're carrying a base back and forth, can't we just request more bases, fundraise for more bases? Aren't there musicians that may be getting bases that would donate bases? I mean, it's about the community involvement and trying to fulfill a need. And you'd be surprised when you reach out. I mean, there's a lot of people that resources. I mean, the piano, there's several, piano companies in town and just expanded their performance space. You never know unless we ask what needs they could fill.
Hey, we got no shortage of pianos here.
Research, Charlie Burrell, who's one of the first, black folks who played for the Colorado Symphony Orchestra. And, he played bass. And I'm wondering, have you all researched talking to them? And if not, I have direct contacts with them, about, seeing if we could
Just like reaching out and see.
donate. Well, I mean, I don't mind reaching out and talking to them. I just have to know that.
What the needs are.
This is not a base problem, right? An instrument is part of your body, especially for the high schoolers.
Yeah.
They don't want to use someone else's instrument.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that we have resources so that they're not waiting around for bases.
Well,
whatever they're.
I'm saying that they can't, if they were to get them bass instruments and have them over here available, if they can't use them.
No, what I'm saying is that we only have practice rooms in the middle school. High schoolers desperately need practice rooms.
As we're thinking about building out this campus, all of that will be part of the conversation.
There's and there have been.
Performance spaces, practice spaces, lab spaces, science labs or something we're lacking over here. All of that will be part of conversations.
And just to clarify that there will be no more activation of this building until enrollment then allows for the budget to fund that, or are we fundraising? What exactly, where are we now in the process and what is required to continue that?
I think that is at the heart of the fundraising goal for the Ivy League Young. So the per pupil funding that we're talking about for those kids is, 10, depending on the school, 8 to 10, depending on the demographics, and that's basically what we're funded at. State Colorado, by the way, is ranked 47th in the country for per pupil funding, believe it or not, associated with K-12 education. So that we're not talking about resources that will provide the tens of millions, $10, $20 million that it might need to do what we're talking about. I think that really is the fundraising.
I like this because we're getting down into some really, really specific details about chamber orchestra and pianos. There's a comment here about something we're generally as a community identifying what the are, and some of them are they're going to be really specific. They're going to be major specific. That's a nice comment.
I would. For the very specific, our recording should capture those, but if they could online, if they could put them in the forum, we will follow up with them. Because I know we're pretty much at time. I want to respect Andrew's time, Mary Beth's time, all of your time, so that we can then have a hard stop at 7 and then resume their meetings.
So one more question from the chat. People want to know if there's been any discussion of making crossing Montview safe.
From a DSA standpoint, we try to staff the crosswalk as much as possible and during busy times, so before school, after school, lunches. During the passing periods, it gets a little more challenging, but we try to be there. In terms of a bridge or something like that, that is going to be something that
cost
Candidly,
money.
I don't even know who handles that. Who would build?
Something that costs money.
It would definitely cost money.
But, and I hate to keep saying it, right, like, but I think that's just the reality of it. So yeah, we want to, that, I mean, I would have to talk to my colleagues in the city planning department to understand exactly what goes into that, but I'm happy to take that as an action step and see what's possible there. But I'm going to tell you that they're going to turn around to me and say, are you going to cut me a check? And
So, having spent a lot of time emailing city planners, is a divide between DPS responsibilities and the crosswalk as the city. Yes, so like
I mean, I think public infrastructure is a city, you know, that is as soon as we start, and in total transparency, I've negotiated, I've had to hold that line in some of these buildings that we're trying to build to accommodate the kids and not the prairie dogs in the far northeast. And saying, no, I'm not gonna give you $1 million to first of all, I don't have $1 million to give you, and second of all, if I did, I was not give it to you to build a traffic light. That's the developer's responsibility. So I do think there's we have an interest as a school district in keeping the main thing and putting our resources closest to kids. But I do think advocacy to the city. I have for many years advocated to the city around a variety of infrastructure projects that I've been disappointed in the response on. To be totally, this is not an easy conversation in the city.
I would be happy to share with parents the contact information for the city, submit a comment.
We are at 7, so I'm going to kind of wrap and we can have the one-on-ones as needed, but thank you all for being here. Thank you for those who logged in online. We will get this recording up on our website probably Tuesday. I can't guarantee tomorrow, but we will strive for tomorrow. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Well, I.
You know what? It's back to my job, I guess. It's wild, so. But that's fine.
I do. She's the best boss I ever had. I will usually use it in our here to you. Awesome. Are you a campfront guy? Yeah, I went to Sandra. Thank you.
I'll walk down with you. Wow, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Very bad.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
What's your?
Yeah, it's S. D.
Want to end that line?
S.
That's gonna. Right now.
So I will reach out to you.
Great.
Information.
That's okay. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this. Yeah. Thanks for being here.